Good morning and welcome to BPA's first quarterly business review for fiscal year 2025. I'm Joel Scruggs, BPA's Chief Communications Officer. We appreciate you making time for this forum today. Before we get started, I want to share a few reminders. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to BPA's YouTube channel at a later date. The WebEx link is available on the event calendar on bpa.gov. If you experience any trouble with WebEx, you can find the slide deck online at bpa.gov/QBR. That's bpa.gov/QBR. One other note, you may have noticed the first slide here today highlights the accessibility tools in WebEx. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with these features and use them as needed. BPA uses webinar mode in WebEx for public-facing meetings and workshops. This mode has some restricted features and all attendees are muted upon entry. However, we welcome your questions and engagement. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation and we will respond to them at the end. To submit a question, click the three little white dots in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, then the Q&A button, input your question and press send. Your questions will be sent to the BPA host. And if you think of a question after our presentation today has ended, you're welcome to email us directly at communications@bpa.gov. We also kindly encourage you to include your company or organization name in your display name. Having your company name on display helps our panelists and other participants during the Q&A portion of this meeting. All right, this morning our Administrator and CEO John Hairston will share an overview of BPA's first quarter operational performance, and then our Acting Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer Veronica Wittig will summarize the agency's financial performance. John will then close out the main presentation with updates on a few strategic initiatives, and following that I will highlight some upcoming public meetings, workshops, and processes, and then we'll wrap up with any questions that you might have. And with that, I'll hand it over to John. Good morning, John.
All right, thanks, Joel. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you today to share BPA's first quarter results. Now, I want to start by welcoming a new voice to the QBR. You may have heard that Marcus Harris departed from BPA last month, and while it was very hard to see him go, we are fortunate to have a strong leadership team within our finance organization. Now, I've asked Veronica Wittig, who you may know as Bonneville's Deputy Chief Financial Officer, to serve as acting CFO, and she'll be providing today's financial updates. And Veronica has over 20 years of federal financial experience in public power and a dozen years in leadership. Before she became Deputy CFO in 2022, she worked as an accounting officer and account manager. I'm happy to have someone with her caliber in this critical role. Veronica and I have a lot to cover today, but I also want to set expectations about some of the topics that we won't be able to cover in great detail. Now, I know there is a lot of interest in BPA's implementation of President Trump's executive orders and how those orders are expected to impact our business. We're working closely with the Department of Energy to carry out the President's direction. Last week, new Secretary of Energy Chris Wright shared the administration's vision for making electricity more abundant and more affordable for Americans. We see great opportunity in supporting and advancing the administration's goals to unleash American energy dominance. And indeed, Bonneville will play a key role in our region as we continue to execute our mission by delivering safe, reliable transmission services. Now, BPA's workforce continues to deliver results with dedication and accountability to our customers and the region. And even in these times of uncertainty, they continue to prove their commitment to our mission. Now, it's a privilege for me to lead such a dedicated, high-performing team that cares deeply about BPA's vital role here in the region, as well as our contribution to national and economic security in alignment with the Trump administration's energy goals. So, let's take a look at our core operations. On slide 6, you'll see that we're off track in a few areas, but it's early in the year, and we expect most of these will turn around as we move through the next 3 quarters. and we did not complete as many safety corrective actions as targeted for in Q1. Our corrective action program is an important element of our safety culture and ensuring we provide a safe environment for our workforce. And we are prioritizing efforts to turn this around and stay on target for the rest of the year. Turning to our power reliability, you can see we missed our target for unplanned hydropower outages, ending the quarter with a forced outage factor of 8.8%. So this is down from 9.8% at the end of fiscal year 24, thanks to several units being returned to service. These include Bonneville units 3, 10, and 12, Chief Joseph Unit 9, and Grand Coulee Unit 16. Now, the primary driver of the Q1 result is a 690 megawatt outage at Grand Coulee's Unit 19, but we expect that unit will return to service in Q2. The long-term outages at John Day, the Dalles, and Bonneville dams are also contributors. Now, the Bureau of Reclamation and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are working to return a major unit to service. BPA continues to work closely with the Corps and Reclamation to coordinate the work and reprioritize funding to address the most impactful outages in a timely manner. Now, of the 4 transmission system performance measures, 3 are red and 1 is on track with caution. Now, this is primarily due to a high wind event in October and a mid-November bomb cyclone that brought high winds, rain, falling trees throughout western Washington. Now, these measures are highly weather dependent, but with Mother Nature's cooperation, we expect to meet our end-of-year targets. Now, on the finance side, we are forecasting negative net revenues, and that is having a downward impact on our forecast for days cash on hand. Now, there is a lot of uncertainty in the forecast for the rest of the year, but we are prepared to manage this uncertainty by following our financial plan and using the liquidity tools that it provides. Now, with that, I'll hand it over to Veronica to walk us through more of the details. Veronica?
Thank you, John. I am honored to be BPA's acting CFO, and it is a pleasure to be with you all today for the first quarter business review of 2025. We are forecasting green on most core financial KPIs, except for agency net revenues, resulting in the agency-based cash on hand to be red as well. Before I go over our Q1 results and our performance through Q1, I want to remind folks there is significant uncertainty at this time of the year with respect to water conditions and market prices. So our net revenues picture may change significantly, which may also impact some of our other financial KPIs. Also, as John mentioned earlier, we are working closely with the Department of Energy to carry out President Trump's directives. The Q1 forecast was developed based on information at the end of December 2024 and does not reflect the impact of executive orders on BPA's financial forecast. Through Q1, our net revenues forecast is negative $44 million, compared to our target of positive $70 million. IPR cost expenditures are in line with expectations, and we are currently forecasting them to be right at the target. Lower than expected net revenues have decreased our forecast of days cash on hand at Q1 to 58 days, cash on hand at the end of fiscal year 2025. 2 days lower than our target. Days cash on hand is our primary liquidity metric, and we are closely monitoring it. We feel confident that we have adequate within-year liquidity, and we will be able to make our full treasury payment at the end of the year. Our financial resource policy and strong liquidity tools allow us to handle uncertainty without having to risk a missing payment to Treasury or last in line creditor. Agency capital expenditures are on track to be within the target range of $1.077 billion and $1.376 billion. with a Q1 end-of-the-year forecast of $1.2 billion. The debt-to-asset KPI is also on track to decrease by a little over 1% to 78.9%, down from 80.4% at the end of fiscal year 24. Related to this is our borrowing authority KPI, which tracks our available borrowing authority over a rolling 20-year period. As noted at the end of fiscal year 24, we are reporting this as green, but this assumes the use of additional access to capital tools. There are no forecasted scenarios showing borrowing authority constraints in the next 10 years. But in the later part of the 20-year period, we see constraints due to the transmission capital expansion program. However, we intend to use other available access to capital tools to ensure no borrowing authority constraints over this full 20-year period. We will share more on these plans at a future QBR technical workshop this fiscal year. Turning to slide 9, we will look at the details specific to the power business line. Starting with the blue bar on the left side is the net revenue target of $77 million. Moving to the second bar, Power's operating revenues are forecast to come in at $98 million above target, largely driven by higher trading floor sales and 4% credits for fish mitigation activities. Both increases are driven by higher power prices. Moving on to the third bar, the IPR expense forecast is equal to the target. In the fourth bar, the non-IPR expense forecast is $191 million above the KPI target, primarily due to dry conditions leading to increased purchases, particularly in December through February. Driven mainly by higher non-IPR power purchase expenses, Power's first quarter net revenue forecast is negative $16 million, which is $93 million below the KPI target. Results from the Q1 forecast estimate is slight true up as a charge of $23.6 million, largely driven by higher operating expenses. Moving to transmission on slide 10, starting with the blue bar on the left, transmission's KPI target is negative $7 million. Moving to the second bar, transmission IPR expense forecast is $1 million below target. The third bar, transmission non-IPR expense forecast is $6 million above the target, largely due to higher interest expense from greater borrowing from the U.S. Treasury. Looking at the fourth bar, transmission operating revenues forecast is $16 million below the target. This is driven by a decrease on point-to-point long-term revenues due to customers deferring transmission service requests. Network load revenues are also lower than expected due to loads growing more slowly than forecast. Looking at the bar on the far right, in total, transmission lower than expected operating revenues and increased cost pressures in non-IPR expenses results in a transmission first quarter end of year net revenues forecast of negative $28 million, which is $21 million below the KPI target. Let's now turn to financial reserves on slide 11. Agency financial reserves for risk are forecast to be $416 million at the end of this fiscal year, a decrease of $364 million from the prior year. From the business line perspective, we forecast Power to end the year with $288 million in reserves for risk, a decrease of $219 million from the prior year. And transmission to end the year with $171 million of reserves for risk, a decrease of $144 million from the prior year. Looking at the cash on hand, which is a key performance indicator associated with the financial plan, the agency is forecast to end the year at 58 days. Transmission at 78 days and Power at 50 days. Note, the Power forecast assumes that we forego the planned revenue financing in fiscal year 24, to preserve liquidity. 60 days cash on hand is the lower threshold for both business lines to trigger a financial reserves policy surcharge. This is a different position that we have been in the past years. We have been fortunate to be in a reserve distribution clause position for one or both business units every year since fiscal year 20. And we have used those funds to benefit our customers through revenue distributions, debt reductions, or to support other agency priorities. With a potential power surcharge, it is important to highlight again that there is significant uncertainty in Q1 forecast and that we are examining what financially prudent actions we can take to reduce the likelihood of a surcharge. Turning to our capital program on slide 12. Through Q1, our capital execution is on track, and thus you can see there is only one variance from target in the Q1 forecast. The blue bar on the left side is the KPI midpoint target of $1.196 billion for capital expenditures. The upper and lower dash green lines are the target execution range for total direct capital investments of plus 15% and minus 10% of the midpoint target. Enterprise services, which include the facilities, fleet, IT, and security asset categories, has a forecast of $4 million above the midpoint target. Almost all of this increase is in security due to higher construction costs than estimates. As there are no other variances, we will move to the final bar on the right, showing the Q1 end of the year forecast of $1.2 billion for agency direct capital expenditures. More details will be shared at the QBR technical workshop later today. This concludes the final report for the first quarter. Thank you all for your time. I will now turn it back to John.
All right, thank you, Veronica. Now I'll dive into some updates on our executive orders and BPA's strategic initiatives. Now, you've likely heard that President Trump issued a hiring freeze on January 20th. All recruitment actions, including the job postings to permanently fill the CFO position, are now on hold until further notice. A similar freeze is in effect for our supplemental labor. Now, you may have also heard that the administration has offered all federal employees a program called deferred resignation, which allows them to resign or remain on the payroll for 8 months. The window for responding to this offer closed yesterday. So far, we have approximately 200 BPA employees who have accepted this offer, but that could change based on desires to rescind or maybe some late applications for that offer. We will be performing a workforce analysis and staffing plan in preparation for the program's implementation. We also took action to comply with an executive order to end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. These actions included closing our culture office, which housed the DEIA program. Now, we're updating BPA's 2024 to 2028 strategic plan to align with the administration's strategic direction. We'll be reposting the strategic plan and update you on changes once the review is complete. In alignment with another executive order, we are bringing our workforce back to the office full-time. Now, we're coordinating with DOE to develop our return to office work plan, and this change should be as seamless from a customer and operations perspective. Now, I want to express my appreciation to Bonneville's workforce for navigating these changes with professionalism, maintaining focus on BPA's critical mission, and advancing our strategic initiatives. The Trump administration and our new Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, have made it clear that it's a national priority to increase the abundance of affordable, reliable, and secure energy, to strengthen the grid, and to enable the projects that will improve people's lives. Now, this is exactly what we're working towards here at BPA, and I'm excited to work with the new DOE leadership and deliver on these goals. Now, let's turn to some of our initiatives that are underway. Now, we're getting closer to offering new long-term power contracts. The provider of choice team is working to close out the development of draft contracts. with the final round of intensive public workshops coming up next week on February 18th, 19th, 20th to discuss those provisions. Now, these engagements are critical to ironing out the details that are important to both BPA and our customers. Now, that will be followed by a formal comment period from mid-March to mid-April, keeping us on track to have final templates by June and signed contracts by December. Our customers should look for a letter sent earlier this week from Vice President of Northwest Requirements Marketing, Kim Thompson. The letter outlines upcoming contract-related deadlines, including the contract and product request period that will run from April 1st to June 18th. Now, this is when eligible public body and cooperative utilities can request a provider of choice contract and make their product election. Now, you can find this letter on the Provider of Choice website along with many other resources. On the transmission planning front, we're at a point where we need to reform our processes so that we can move projects forward and strengthen the grid. Like many other transmission providers across the country, BPA is experiencing a surge in transmission service demand for new resources and loads. Now, the volume of transmission requests we received for the next transmission cluster study totals over 65 gigawatts. These new requests alone exceeds the total regional load projected in the Pacific Northwest in 2034. Now, our current processes were not designed to handle this volume, and we recently announced a pause in several planning processes so that we can work with customers and interested parties to craft and implement needed reforms. To kick off this effort, we held a customer meeting on February 11th where we discussed the scope of the reforms and customer impacts, as well as our engagement strategy. And we know that time is of the essence and will work expeditiously to meet the needs of our customers and the region. And in the meantime, we'll continue to advance certain planning functions and initiatives, including all capital projects currently in flight. Now, we are also on schedule to release our day-ahead market draft policy in March, followed by a final policy and record of decision in May. We continue to consider customer input and perspectives as we work our way through to a final decision. Now, our analysis will be based on the day-ahead market principles we developed with customers and stakeholders' input. It will also reflect recent market developments since the release of the 2024 staff recommendation. Now, these include announcements by utilities to join either Markets Plus or EDAM, and the latest developments in the West-wide Governance Pathways Initiative. Also, FERC's approval of SPP Markets Plus tariff and additional scenario analysis by E3 will be considered. Now, following the release of our day-ahead market draft policy in March, BPA will open a 30-day comment period, so stay tuned for all of the additional information. Now, I'll close with some exciting news from transmission operations. On January 30th, BPA broke ground on the new Vancouver Control Center at Ross Complex. When the VCC is fully integrated into our system in 2031, it will begin a new era of grid visibility and control for BPA. The new facility has been intelligently designed to address evolving technology, continuity, safety, and security needs. Its design will support the evolution of the bulk power grid over the next 50 years while providing flexibility for growth and market opportunities. And most importantly, it was designed with the safety of our workforce and the general public in mind. It will support BPA's ability to respond to and recover from hazardous events, and it includes security features that will allow us to monitor, identify, respond to, and mitigate threats to the region's electric grid. Now, it's exciting to see the construction begin after so many years of planning, but it's great to see it moving forward finally. Now, that concludes my update, and I'll turn it back over to you, Joel.
All right. Thank you, John and Veronica. I'm going to quickly share where you can join us in upcoming meetings, workshops, and processes, and highlight any current comment periods, then we'll close out with questions. As a reminder, you can find our customer and public meetings and workshops listed on the event calendar on bpa.gov when you navigate to the Learn and Participate tab. Here are a few highlights from our calendar that I want to make you aware of. We're hosting the QBR Technical Workshop this afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m. We encourage you to participate in this workshop where our finance team will provide additional information on some of the topics discussed today. There will also be agency updates, including Fed Hydro, transmission, energy imbalance market participation, metrics, and updates from the Western Resource Adequacy Program. Note that the Columbia Generating Station uprate topic has been removed from the agenda. Again, you can find more information about the QBR Technical Workshop on our QBR webpage at bpa.gov/QBR. And as mentioned, next week we're hosting 3 provider of choice hybrid workshops. These workshops will be held both in our rates hearing room in Portland and via WebEx. As a reminder, BPA released its provider of choice policy and record of decision almost a year ago on March 21st. In April, we began this public process to determine how to implement the policy through provider of choice contracts and other associated rate methodology processes. And as John mentioned earlier, we're on track for offering new long-term power contracts later this year. Looking ahead to March, BPA will hold a generator interconnection transition cluster scoping meeting on March 5th from 10 a.m. to noon. Agenda items include a summary of information on interconnection requests eligible for the transition cluster study, reviewing maps, and a high-level overview of the transition cluster study process. And then after a lunch break on March 5th, we'll also be holding the annual Joint Operating Committee from 1 to 3 p.m. That will cover an update on the technical requirements for generator interconnection and include a discussion on the model acceptance tool. These meetings will be in person in the rates hearing room with a virtual option via WebEx. And then after the meetings, BPA will open the 45-day calendar day customer engagement window. And then later in March, we'll be hosting a day-ahead market participation workshop. That's on March 19th, coinciding with the release of BPA's draft policy letter for participating in a day-ahead wholesale electricity market. All right, looking at public comment periods, there is currently one open. The comment period for the BP26 rate proposal is open until Valentine's Day, tomorrow, February 14th. This comment period is open to only participants. It's not for rate case parties, BPA customers whose rates are subject to this proceeding or their affiliated customer groups may not submit participant comments. Members or employees of organizations that have intervened in the proceeding may submit participant comments as private individuals, and they cannot speak on behalf of their organizations. As a reminder, you could find comment periods hosted by BPA and submit your comments on the public comment section of our website. Go to ppa.gov/comments, and it will take you directly to our comments webpage. All right, that concludes our presentation portion today, and we'll now transition over to a brief question and answer session. To ask a question, please submit it through the Q&A field in WebEx or raise your hand to be unmuted. I saw that Sydney Villanueva submitted a couple of questions that we've responded to already. Let's see, so the first question was, can BPA confirm its current borrowing authority amount? And it would be helpful if it were included on the QBR slide. So BPA's current borrowing authority cap is $13.7 billion. At the end of QN on December 31st, BPA had $7.4 billion remaining. And at the start of fiscal year 2028, BPA's borrowing authority increases from $13.7 billion to $17.7 billion. And then another question from Sydney, is 200 employees about 10% of BPA's workforce? So regarding the 200 BPA federal employees who have opted into the Office of Personnel Management's Deferred Resignation Program, 200 would represent about 6% of BPA's federal workforce. All right. Have any other questions trickled in?
Joel. It looks like nobody is raising their hands for a verbal question, but let me check the chat box.
Okay, so this is regarding the hiring freeze. Tony Schick is asking, how many offers have been rescinded as a result of the hiring freeze? I believe we had 90 job offers that had been extended that were rescinded as a result of the hiring freeze. Thank you for the question, Tony. I'll give folks another moment here. Last call for questions. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, we will conclude this morning's presentation. Oh, looks like one just popped up. Okay, so Tricia Russell is asking, aside from the resignation options happening, do you know how many are taking advantage of the retirement options being offered? I think it's premature for us to know that at this stage. But there, yeah, there could be some impact with that level of attrition as well. Okay. Well, if there aren't any additional questions, we can wrap up. However, if you think of a question later or would prefer to submit it via email, you can email us at communications@bpa.gov, and we expect to hear more of your questions at the QBR technical workshop this afternoon, which begins at 1 p.m. The questions that we did receive do not need to be resubmitted. We'll be posting responses to your questions on the QBR webpage in the coming weeks, along with a recording and transcript of today's meeting. Furthermore, if you have a topic that you think warrants further discussion, please let us know. Email us at communications@bpa.gov, and we will look at the best way for providing you that information. It would also greatly aid us with the production of future QBR forums if you would take a few minutes and complete the post-event feedback survey. It's linked, I think, in the chat box, so we're going to drop it in there, and we'll also email it to today's attendees. So again, we really appreciate you listening today and engaging with us in this forum and others. Our next quarterly business review will be on Thursday, May 15th, when we will be presenting the agency's second quarter FY2025 performance results. Until then, stay safe and healthy. Thank you.